Welcome to the Cult of the Clocktower. I am Andrew Nathenson. Every other week, a special guest and I have an in-depth discussion about something from Blood on the Clocktower. It was a character from the game Blood on the Clocktower for a while, but we've run out of characters in the base 3, other than Fabled and stuff. But, that being said, we're going to be talking about something else today, and joining me is Ed.
Hey.
Hey, Ed. This episode's also a little bit different because we are recording it live in front of a studio audience. Not that this is a studio, but it's kind of an echoey room. I hope it sounds good.
I mean, even if it doesn't, it's going live, right? So,
that's true. Today, we're going to be talking about... Oh, I should specify why we're doing that. We're in Clocktower. This is Clocktower Con. We're recording a...
Despite the appearance of how professional this is, the con is very organised. We're just here to talk nonsense, but the con is all over. This is amazing. This is so organised. This is on point. We're starting on time, which we have never done.
It's true. Often our podcasts are delayed by hours or more.
And I had a moment as you were doing the introduction where I was really tempted to start singing one of the themes, and I couldn't pick between the different themes. I was like, nah, and then just did none of them.
Yeah, that's probably for the best. Clocktower Con has been great so far. However, we do only have an hour, so instead of talking about how great Clocktower Con is, let's get to our topic, which is revisiting Trouble Brewing. It's been quite a while since we talked about Trouble Brewing on the podcast. This will be probably a little bit more from my perspective, because the audience has heard a lot more from me about Trouble Brewing. Although with the length of your episodes, it is also... Kelly's making some weird sip. No, this is good content. Keeping this in.
Pancake awful.
But you have been on episodes of Trouble Brewing as well. But basically, we wanted to take a look at things we've talked about in the past in Trouble Brewing, things I've talked about, and things we haven't talked about as well, and just talk about how our opinions have changed, how they've changed the same, stayed the same, things where our opinions have gotten stronger, generally about strategy in the game, but also about storytelling and other stuff. So, with that being said, Ed, what's something about Trouble Brewing that you used to think, in your opinion, has gotten even stronger over time?
I'm going to just lead with something that people don't associate with me, because I love this. Randomly lying, just because you feel like it in Trouble Brewing, very powerful. People approach Trouble Brewing and they play the first game, they try and bluff, and they don't really know what they're doing. But that's how this works, right? You play Trouble Brewing as your first game, you don't know what you're doing. You just make it up as you go, and you try some stuff. And usually you just lie about what you are, or you tell the truth about what you are. Those are basically your options. And people...
It's hard to do something different.
Yeah. People don't do role swaps, they don't necessarily do... There's no, the strategy develops, right? And I love that that's the way I place people start. They just look at this sheet and go, sure, I'll claim to be that seems fun. That fits with what I'm trying to do. And then people go past that and they go, right, okay, well now I'm doing something for a goal. I'm bluffing this because I want to do that. And that's great. That is really effective, it gets you a long way. At a certain point, actually being too predictable with that becomes its own thing. And people start reading you. People start reading you based on what you're telling them. And I get a huge amount of joy occasionally of going, I realise that I'm the Raven Keeper, but I am going to bluff Soldier anyway. It's not helping. It's not a useful thing for me to bluff. But what it means is that the evil team don't know. And if I don't know what I'm going to bluff, they certainly don't.
I think that it's the sort of thing where I've often thought, and this is kind of, I don't know if I even put this in here, but this is something that I've thought for a while, is that sort of the optimal place to be in terms of how people read you and your meta is, well, the optimal place would be you get people to think exactly what you want them to think every time. The reasonable place that I think most players should be aiming to get to is where, when you're good, the evil team doesn't know if you're telling the truth or not. So they don't know if they should be killing you, they don't know if they should be poisoning you. And that has the side effect of also, making it so that the good players don't know that either, but eventually you come clean and things will start to fit together. So I think that's kind of where this comes from, is that if you're just randomly lying, that randomness, if you can actually make it random, is basically accomplishing that. It's putting you in a place where you're sort of in between, and it's really hard to tell that apart.
Yeah, and I have this as a very philosophical point about Clocktower generally. The game is most fun when everyone is good at being both good and evil, because you randomly draw the tokens out of the bag. You can't just have, you can't have some people who are the best evil players in the world and always give them evil so that you have the best possible game, and you always give the best good players the best possible characters for them so you have the best possible game. You're drawing randomly out of a bag. So by nature, if someone's not very good at being evil, everyone has a bit less fun because you win too easily. So actually, the best thing for everyone is for everyone to be equally good at playing both sides of the alignment spectrum, or the flippers. And so doing things that you don't necessarily do normally really helps, because it helps you play as good as if you were evil, as evil as if you were good. It helps you do both at once in some cases, and it challenges you to think about things differently. It's really easy to fall into, I'm this character that I know and I'm going to do this thing. And it's like, actually, if you do that every time, people are going to play you differently. And I take a lot of joy in just being like, I'm going to do some nonsense. I also have been recently causing a lot of trouble by, I stopped doing roll swaps. This is something else I stopped doing 3 for 3s, and I stopped doing any sort of claiming on day one, because people just lie or they hard claim, and I'm not interested in either of those things, because if you hard claim to me, I have to remember. And if you lie to me, I should remember, and I don't care. But people, day one, you're not giving me anything valuable. Like, we all know that day one is sort of like a just testing the waters situation. And maybe you find one person you trust, but most people don't. You tend to have a sort of like, maybe about everyone. So what I decided to start doing is I ask people really weird, abstract questions, because they are much more inclined to tell you the truth. So just to give you an example of one I've used a couple of times this weekend. If you were walking into an airport and you got to TSA and you had your character icon in your bag, how worried would you be?
I would probably answer that truthfully.
See, it's so much fun for people to engage with that they just go with it. Like, I've even had evil players be like, yeah, I know that I should be bluffing, but it's so much more fun to answer correctly. That's not helpful to the situation. I've been finding it very fun. You should try stuff like that occasionally. If you have ideas of other random questions I should ask people, please do tell me.
Is your character more like a pancake or a waffle? People listening at home won't get that, and that's okay. You mentioned roll swaps. I think that roll swaps are strong.
Yeah.
Like, very, very strong. I think they're one of the strongest things you can do in trouble brewing, in terms of gaining a strategic edge on the evil team, because, and in order to set up a roll swap, I don't think you really need any kind of special circumstances. So a lot of players I've noticed will do roll swaps when they have like some confirmation of one side or the other, like a washroom and confirming some townsfolk, they'll swap with them. That's fairly standard and easy. I think that it's good for almost anybody to roll swap with anybody else, because you could swap with an evil character, in which case you're giving up that information. But like, what do you lose? Like,
yeah, and you can do it. It doesn't even matter if they're lying.
Yeah.
That's the nice thing about a roll swap, is that if they're lying, it's almost better because you're confusing the evil team more, right?
I think that it's, a lot of players think of roll swaps as, I have to trust this person, then I can swap what I'm claiming with them. But really, you can just swap what you're claiming with anybody, and that will accomplish the task of getting whatever the information was that they wanted to get out into the game. It'll get that out into the game. Whether it's true or not, if they were lying, that's fine. They were going to put that information into the game anyway, so it doesn't matter that it's coming from you. But that has the chance where if everybody did that, I think most of the roll swaps would end up being between good players, and that would confuse things for the evil team. But of course, you probably don't want everybody to do it, because then you know to expect it. But like, if half the people do a roll swap like that, I think it just ends up being quite a bit better for the good team.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this a bit when we were talking about BMR, the intro to BMR, no matter what, the good team is always most benefited by getting the information out there. We don't care who the information's from. I mean, yeah, if you're an empath, it's tricky to share that information without it being identifiably you. But top 4, I don't care who's telling me the top 4 information. I just want to know the top 4 information. Undertakers, outside accounts. The fact that there is someone claiming Soldier and Ravenkeeper, I don't just know who it is. I just need to know that it's out there, because that is what dictates my strategy and how I use my ability. If I've heard nothing about any protection characters, I ain't coming out as a fortune teller.
Yeah, I can also say that of the times when I've been evil and like lost badly, most of the time that's because of a roll swap that I didn't catch. Where it's like, I thought I was killing the empath who's been getting really strong information, and I'm not. Or I thought I'd been killing the fortune teller to stop them from finding out more and narrowing down that I'm the demon, but I haven't. Or like a really effective one between like a soldier and a monk.
Yeah. And it's also one of the joyous things about role swaps is the better you know your group, the more fun they get. Because I've got players in my group now who know each other well enough that they can look at each other in the morning and the expression on the person with information's face tells the other one what they should claim. Like, I've had an empath wake up and sort of like making this grimace, and the other person's immediately like, right, we're killing one of their neighbours. They just knew to look at each other because they were role swapping. And this is like, you get more and more strategy out of it as you go.
All right, now we've spent about 10 minutes getting through 2 of our like 30 or so bullet points here. So let's move on to a couple other things that I think we can go over somewhat quickly. Still in the section of things where our opinions have gotten stronger. My opinion is that skipping executions is almost always bad in Trouble Brewing.
I have an opinion later which slightly disagrees with this.
That's fine.
We'll get to that
that's why we color-coded them, so we know who wrote it.
Admittedly, we color-coded these, and at this range, yours is really legible. My hot pink, quite tricky to read, but we've done it now, and I'm sticking with it, because there's no situation where hot pink isn't the right answer.
Yeah, so I think that skipping executions is almost always bad in Trouble Brewing. I noticed quite a few games recently where it's like, when I look back at them and it's like, what was the turning point? Especially games where it was sort of like the good team feels like we didn't have much of a chance. And usually looking back on those, it's like there was a skipped execution, you would have had one fewer demon candidate, and I think most likely they would have got it if they had done it. And that can even be on something like skipping on like 6. Yeah. That's a common place where people want to skip. And this is something where I used to think that was like pretty much okay. Just in the past like few weeks, I've started to go back on that a little bit, which is that now I think that skipping on like 6, if there's someone who's been doing a really good job of like making their soldier or monk go under the radar, you could be depriving yourself of value there. And I think that usually like you can kind of predict who's going to be killed around then anyway, so you're not going to like execute it.
Yeah, I'm going to come to my counterpoint now because who cares about
makes more sense than coming to it later.
Yeah, we made a plan. We're going to ignore it. That's more fun. The counterpoint is what I see people doing a lot, especially in Trouble Rings. They have this obsession with we gotta kill someone. It's the only way we win the game, and it's like that's true. You're not wrong. But also, if you've nominated 2 people, both of which were decent candidates, and you've tied, I almost never want to go for another execution just because we should be killing someone. I don't want to tell the evil team who our next candidate is. I want them to look at that other person. I'm hoping that at least one of those 2 people that we've just tied on was evil. That's probably why we've tied on them. That's how that works. Like, most likely one of them's evil. I want the evil team to be looking at those 2 as the evil candidates and not know what else we're thinking. If they've seen us then push for other votes, and maybe if it exceeds, then great. We've executed our 3rd favourite candidate for the demon. If it doesn't succeed, then you've just basically gone, oh yeah, don't kill them either. Now they're the one you need to frame in the final 3. That's not helping us, right? So I agree about skipping with no nominations and no voting. If you've started the voting process and you've not got the people you want on the block, stop.
I think I can agree with that, because I would argue that if you're in that situation, you messed up already. You should just have the conviction to execute one of those players. And it's the sort of thing where it's like, if we could assume that everybody was always playing like 100% like focused and trying to play optimally, that never would have ended up tied in the first place. That's not really that's not really a reasonable assumption. So you can't like call out that last voting player as evil, because like things happen. But so I think if you're in that situation, the mistake happened prior to the point where you should be not executing. But I think that's a good point, that you don't want to be giving away too much more information about who's good to kill.
Yeah, it's amazing how difficult it is, because the good team's entire game is a community decision, right? So you don't know what your team is thinking. You know what you're thinking, you know what the people you're talking to are thinking, but at the moment that it comes to a vote, you know nothing. You don't know what the community consensus is, and the last thing you want is to reveal the consensus to the team who know what their consensus is immediately. They know from the start. You don't want to be showing that off to them.
All right, so
let's learn into the next one here, which is one of mine, and I appreciate this is a weird contradiction to the thing I said about day 1 earlier. People don't trust fall enough, because a lot of the time you get to mid-game and people have either gone, I'm not claiming, or I'm fully out at this point. And actually, this applies a bit more as you get into other editions, but it's true in TB as well. if you trust someone, if you think they're socially good, even if they're alive, I don't care, alive, dead, whatever. Just tell them the truth. Mid game, that's important. It's really helpful. It gets a long way. If you trust one with someone who is evil, then you probably die or get framed, but also that tells you something. And what I find a lot is people tell the truth early, and mid game, the only people who are telling information that they didn't tell right at the start of the game are maybe some top fours who are trying to die in the night, or an outsider who's trying to die in the night. And that's not actually helping most of the time, because that information is usually out there anyway. What I want as a good player in the mid game is for someone who's maybe been hiding, who now thinks, I think Andrew and Andrew and Ben are good. I don't know. There's like, we need to remove the screen because people should be seeing your face. And I don't know about Capelli and Tony and various others. So I'm just going to tell the people I trust, because how they respond to that is also really important. Like, that's how you're going to get the next social read. Once you trust someone, that you're getting no more information out of that. Your mind is already trusting them. That's how you're interacting with them socially. That's not going to change unless they change it. So if you want to learn more, change it. Give them some information that they didn't have before and see what comes back.
I think that something people probably hear from me a lot is, you died in the night, I don't think evil would kill them, like an evil player in this situation, so I trust you, so I'm going to tell you your information. That's something I do all the time, and I mean in any script, but especially in Trouble Brewing. If somebody dies and they look like they're just a good player who died to me, I'll just go tell them my information, because I want that information to be out there. I want it, and like you said, that's how they're going to change the way that they act and the way they recontextualize things. So you can't act on information that you don't have. So I think that's also a large thing that a lot of players overlook about the game, is that getting all the information on the last day isn't the same as getting it much earlier, because the earlier you have it, the more you can tailor your executions and just the way you play out the game and get to a very different final three than you would otherwise.
And we've talked frequently about the fact that if you don't share information soon enough, people are trying to work it out while voting on final three, and that's how mayors die. I've had 4 games with mayors in this weekend. They've all been executed in the final 5 or 3. Everyone.
One last point in the things I used to think, in my opinion's gotten even stronger section, which is a very long title, which is that confirmed outsiders are stronger than non-confirmed townsfolk. What do I mean by confirmed outsiders? Basically, if you are in, say, a 2-outsider game, and there's one person claiming to be the recluse, and nobody else claiming to be an outsider, that recluse is confirmed, they're good, you can trust them, you can give them all your info, they're one of the strongest players you can have, and eventually the demon's gonna have to kill them instead of someone more important. So, like, don't ever execute that player just because they're a recluse. I think I haven't seen it as much recently. I think players are getting a little bit better about this in general, but it's just like, it's very easy to come up with reasons to kill somebody who doesn't claim to have an ability that's like getting information. Yeah. But their ability is that they know they're the recluse.
I've got a midway transition from this to the next section where our opinions have stayed about the same, which is people like executing recluses, and the problem is that they usually do it on day 1 or day 2. And the problem with doing it on day 1 or day 2 is you don't know yet if they're confirmed by outside account. By all means, if it should be a 0 outsider game, maybe you can just get off the recluse on day 1 or day 2. But if it's supposed to be a 2 outsider game and you execute your recluse immediately, firstly, poor Undertaker. But secondly, what did you do that for? Like, yes, they don't mind. If your execution criteria is they don't mind, you're not going to get very far in Clocktower. But it just doesn't help a lot of the time, because you're going to find out at some point that you might find out at some point even, that player was going to get confirmed by outside account, and you executed them just because you didn't have anyone else to execute on day 1. That's not very helpful. And actually, the recluse doesn't mess with that much.
Yeah, period.
That's pretty much it. Either they've messed with starting information, and you can't do anything about it by killing them, or they're going to mess with fortune teller or empath. And if the recluse is sat next to an empath and they haven't already claimed recluse to someone, kill them. That's an evil player that's found out they're sat next to an empath. But otherwise, they're not messing with that thing. What's the harm in leaving life?
I would also say that in general, an recluse being next to empath, that is a legitimate reason, like, to get rid of that misinformation. Yeah. So, but if they are a confirmed recluse, it might not be worth it.
But also, I do sometimes find it quite interesting to watch the storyteller from the perspective of if one of the other neighbours die, when the empath is sat next to a claimed recluse, see what the hell is the number. It's usually quite interesting because storytellers can be meted, Capelli.
Let's see.
Say that when I've got a microphone in front of me, man. I've got no guts.
Technically, there is a microphone in front of you. It's just not close enough.
I'm not on trial.
Let's see. Okay, so we already touched on this one, which is unless you know how someone will read you in advance, it's better to be ambiguous, which is kind of the very first thing I said. So I'm not going to go into more on that.
About whether you want to die, this was.
Specifically about whether you want to die, not just in general, but I mean, but general about what you are kind of leads to whether or not you want to die. But
although I did see a really good homebrew minion idea the other day, which was anyone who is happy to die might.
Nice. My next point on here is the spy is the strongest minion. This is something I've thought forever, and I still think it.
That 3-hour episode we did on the spy.
Yeah. I see you have a note in here though as well.
Yeah, when we wrote that and did that 3-hour episode, the spy was my favourite evil team character. It's probably a favourite character in Trouble Brewing. He's no longer my favourite character to
What's
be.
wrong with you?
Because, frankly, the spy, when you get to a certain point, doesn't help as much as you think it does. And actually, if I want to have fun, I either want to be the demon who's getting to kill people and run the show and then see when I want to star pass and have fun and mock people and be stupid, or the Baron who gets to do whatever they like, run around, mock people and be stupid. You know, it's a theme.
Ed, we're not here to have fun, we're here to win.
I've found a problem. Or the Scarlet Woman, where I get to push shade on my imp and run around, have fun, and mock the imp. This is like, in no situation would I pick the spy over all of the others. I think it's massively powerful, and I can do a lot with the spy. But if I'm going to pull like my fantasy league of which evil character do I want to be in TV, it's no longer the spy. Sorry, spy. But your registering is good anyway. You don't mind.
I think I still enjoy playing the spy quite a bit. I think I enjoy the puzzle solving part of the game, which as a spy you get like, it's just a big puzzle at the very start, so that's very much appeals to me, but I can see why you feel that way.
But you quite like a big setting up worlds and setting up the strings and seeing what you can get away with, right? And I tend to run much more in let's see what happens. Could you tell? I've got a couple of notes on the bottom here, and one of these is the most important thing. Actually, both of these I think are the most important thing about TV to me. TV never gets old. No situation where I don't go. If someone goes, "Do you want to play TV?" and I'm not doing anything at the time, I'll go yes. If I'm sitting there in a circle and someone's gone, "We're about to play S&B," and someone goes, "Do you want to play TV?" I'll probably go yes. If it's BMR, I'll think about it. It depends how tired I am. But like BMR is canonically the best script, but there's no situation where I don't strongly think about playing TV. I can feel Andrew twitching next to me, which is my favourite thing about this. Whenever I make definitive statements.
I mean, that's what you're here for. And as an official representative of Pandemonium Institute, are recorded.
I do forget that. If Steve can get away with leaking stuff on your podcast, I can.
That's true.
I can make definitive statements about TV and BMI, it's fine. And the other one I've got is that I don't think people think about it enough. And I said earlier about playing good and evil and learning from it in TV and doing things differently. I think TV is the testing ground where you should be trying everything. If you've got a strategy that's new, go and do it in TV. I know that you don't necessarily have a character that plays into that strategy. That doesn't mean that you can't do it. If there's something new you want to do socially, that TV is the place to do it because you have complete confidence in the mechanics. You don't have to think about it. Like by the time you're trying weird and wonderful new things and social styles, social plays, you know TV by now. You know all the characters. You don't have to look at the script very often. You mostly use the script to point at, right? That's the level where you're like, okay, I want to try new stuff. I'm just pointing at things on the script. And so TV is the place where you go and do that because you know that mechanically you can do your thing. What you get up to socially isn't going to impact it, but it means that you can then try all those things that you want to do in some of the other scripts that involve a lot more thinking.
without having the pressure of, no, I actually need to get all the mechanics dead right as well. I love it a lot, and people frequently tell me that I'm being weird when I'm playing TV. It's because I was like, someone gave me an idea,
That's like the correct place to be, is being weird.
yeah. And at one point, Aggie, who storytells in TPI streams and plays in my regular group, said something like, "You're being strange," and I had to admit that I'd just done a podcast with Andrew where he gave me an idea, and I was like, "Oh, I wonder what happens if I do that." And then I played a game using a social strategy, which I'm not going to tell you about because it crashed and burned. But I got executed 3 times, not in BMR, because I got executed once and didn't die. Got executed again and did die. And then later, when we wanted to skip, they were like, "Ed was being so weird, let's execute him again." No mechanical benefit whatsoever. They just were like, "No, as punishment for whatever that was, die." So yeah, didn't work. But I did find it quite funny that, you talk to people about the game, and you'll have had this. I'm now talking to people at the con. I apologise to anyone who's listening to the podcast and isn't having conversations with people literally as we speak about Clocktower. When you speak to people at the con about what you've been up to, stories in the game, you'll come up with ideas of like, "Oh, that was a really cool thing that someone did," and then you'll think, "I want to try that." Do you know when you try that? TV!
All right.
Yeah, that's it. You get us back on script, Andrew.
Yeah, that's my job here. I have one that might be controversial.
It's not
Which
controversial.
is, I think it's fair to use the Recluse and Spy to mess with First Night info characters, basically like as much as you want as a storyteller. I don't think it upsets the balance of the game.
No, that's what they're designed for. That's why they're there. If you're not using them at all, that's fine. No, occasionally you do that, but if you never use them, then people learn that.
I think it's like it's okay to even get to the point where the investigator sees a recluse like more often than they see a minion. You don't have to do that. You can certainly have your investigator be getting real minion info as much as you want. But I think that it's fine if that's where your group gets to, and like that, I feel like that opens up plays for the minions. But it also just sort of turns the investigator into like a librarian, which is also a townsfolk.
Yeah, but conversely, I think the level you should be aiming for with how much you're messing with your starting info, your first night info, is you want them to be suspicious when they see the correct thing. You want a librarian that sees recluse to go, "What are you up to?" You want an investigator who sees a spy to go, "Oh, why?" That's the level of like messing with. It's just like, I don't trust this at all. Like, because that means that the instant they've got their info, they're engaging with the game. And if we take this out of the mechanics for a minute, which admittedly we don't do very often, I need to remember to do that. This game is great because you immediately have a community and you engage with people and you talk to people and you get to empathise and learn and try and talk to people and experience different perspectives. And the fact that the instant any top 4 gets their information, they have a reason to talk to 2 people and about 2 people, is a great way to be a community. And it's new people, unless you've got a storyteller who always gives you the same 2 targets, which is...
Well, that's why as a storyteller you want to get those new players involved by showing them to the top 4 characters.
100%.
And chef,
using...
top
yeah.
3.
Yeah, that's fair.
If you show them to the chef, it's a problem.
If you show the chef a waffle, though, they will probably go, "It's a pancake."
I think a waffle is a 1.
Well, I mean, pancakes, depending on... Yeah, anyway.
It's a 0.
Yeah. What is the 2 in the pancake waffle? What's the next capped system?
French toast.
Sausages.
But it's not French toast.
Sausages got a 2-shaped edge to it.
But wait, we're in pastries here, right? So like, I could buy an argument for sausage roll.
I think it's a
whoever started
croissant.
sausage.
Twinkies.
Oh, croissant! I could buy. Yeah, that's.
Great. Muffin.
I think it's a croissant.
A waffle is literally whatever number you want it to be. It's squares, you just break it apart. Defaults to 4 and it goes anywhere you want from there.
Ed, do you hear something?
Crazy UK.
Do you hear? I feel like there's
You could edit that out, right?
let's get into the session where we've changed our minds on things. Things I used to think. Wait, nope, that's not what it says. Why did I phrase it like this? Things I think now, but used to disagree with.
Yeah, let's just pretend we never saw that. And I'm going to spell that off as on the screen. The sentence that we were looking for is things I used to think, but don't think anymore. Isn't that easy to understand?
Wait, no, there's a slight distinction. These are things you think now, but used to disagree with. So these have to be things you think now, not just things you used to think that you don't think. These are things that you do think now.
Okay, I was trying to get to your intent, and you were trying to get to legal. Which is weird, because I'm the one who deals with law. It's not the way around this is supposed to work. But this is almost entirely green, so I'm just going to have a nap, you carry on.
Yeah, okay. Listen, 3 for 3s are not helpful.
That did not get the reaction I was expecting.
Yeah, no, everyone's just like...
there have been multiple times that when the people in this room, there's just been a susurrus of yes. But that one, nothing.
Yeah, so 3 for 3s, the practice of giving 3 roles that you might be for 3 roles someone else might be. Do you know how many demon bluffs there are? That is right, 3.
They need a waffle to help them.
It's one more than a waffle. Wait, no,
I'm not getting back up there. I will not be associated with this anymore.
It's a tri-waffle.
I think that 3 for 3s are just generally... So for one thing, there are so many players who give 3 characters that they aren't any of them.
Yeah.
So you can't trust a 3 for 3.
Hi.
You can't remember a 3 for 3 unless you're taking a lot of notes, which takes a lot of time, which you don't always have. And just generally, it doesn't like make you any more ambiguous than if you always just like hard claim something, and then nobody knows if you're lying or not.
And what's more memorable, right? I'm going back to one of my early ones. What's more memorable? Someone giving you 3 characters, or someone telling you if their character icon would hurt if I threw at them from 10 feet away? I'm just saying, that's surprisingly useful in TV. It really narrows it down. No, because I mean, you've got like the washerwoman and the librarian depends on the book. So it's kind of, but the investigator's got to have quite good aim and be able to get a good rotation on that.
Please don't throw a magnifying glass at me.
I'm just saying, it's very rarely going to hurt much. And you will remember, right? There's nothing about that conversation that you won't remember. As someone looks at you like you're dropped off some other planet, and then goes, yeah, I mean, I noticed when it hit me, but it's probably all right. And you remember that, and then you glance at the sheet later, and you're like, well, I don't remember what 3 characters they claimed, but it would hurt, so...
I think, do you have anything further to say on that?
No, I genuinely dislike 3 for 3s.
Yeah, I think
all the reasons you've stated.
I stop listening when you start telling me 3 characters you might be, because it's just, you could be lying, you could be telling the truth, but even if you are, it's not very helpful.
That isn't where I thought that sentence was going when you started with, I stopped listening when you start, and I was like, oops, sorry, dude.
All right, my next thing here is, this is something where, this is an opinion that probably has changed quite a bit from what I've said on the podcast in the past.
Yeah.
I now think that in Trouble Brewing, going after minions is very close to as important as going after the demon. I think I've said before that like you want to be focusing your efforts on going after the demon, because that's how you win, which is true. But there's just a lot of factors in Trouble Brewing that make it so that the minions are quite strong as well. For one thing, eliminating poisoner candidates will help you to gradually gain trust in the information as you gain it throughout the game. Eliminating the Scarlet Woman is very close to as important as eliminating the demon for most of the game. The spy, I mean, they can catch a star pass at some point and be hard to detect, but if they're hard to detect, you don't really know that you're going after a minion anyway, so that's kind of borderline. Baron is another one where, any of the minions can catch a star pass. So, one last thing.
Yeah, go on.
Before you interrupt me,
Come at me, Nathan.
Capelli and I are starting a fight club. You want to join?
It's fabled. It's a fabled fight club.
Fabled fight club.
Okay, I'm in.
Okay.
I mean,
We can talk about this later.
You're not fabled.
Oh, that's true. I'm not fabled
Yeah,
anymore.
you got.
Oh no.
You got side promoted.
Side promoted. Yeah, I'll take it. Like that's the nicest thing that you could have. That's a really nice way of describing that. I got side promoted. You were going to
What
make
was
a
I
point.
talking about?
Apparently,
Voting power.
Apparently, I interrupted you.
Voting power. When you have more evil players live, it's harder to get votes to go the way the town wants them to. It doesn't take very many players to make it look like a lot of town supports something, which will make players less likely to try to overturn it, because it just feels like a waste of time. The bigger the game, I think, the more true this is. In a smaller game, you can probably just go straight for the demon. But in a big game, you're going to get very strong evil voting blocks very quickly.
I also think it's useful for a bit of a meta reason, because how you can kind of read from the storyteller how well you're doing based on the information you're getting. And one of the things I find quite interesting is when you've executed someone you was accused of being a minion. That Undertaker information is some of the best information in the game. Not because you might get a minion token, but also what minion token you get and whether they get a minion token at all. Because I find it really interesting comparing a social read that made you think you should execute that person with suddenly getting actually shown a Scarlet Woman when an investigator saw a Scarlet Woman. It's like that, for me, that sort of it gives you a lot of information about how the storyteller's thinking, right? It's like, for that situation, they knew they were showing you Scarlet Woman. Whereas if they're, player sat next to an empath, and we've executed them because we think they're evil, probably a minion, not bothered, we're going to execute that player. And you've got an Undertaker that you don't know whether you trust or not, and they get an evil character, you learn a lot about either this is true, or the storyteller wants you to believe that that player was evil. And that really tells you where the game is going a lot more. It's amazing how often, as well, you get to late game, and that minion the storyteller had to show you on night 2 when you executed someone and the Undertaker was drunk, or poisoned, whatever, that is going to give you more information than they thought it did at the time, because they didn't know what you were thinking. They didn't know what you were going to think for the next 4 days. And then suddenly you go, actually, this tells us quite a lot, because we know that there wasn't a Baron, or that there was a Baron, or there wasn't a spy, or almost certainly wasn't a spy. It gives you a lot more than they think it does. So again, mentoring your storytellers is surprisingly powerful, and I think it's fun. So you should do it at every opportunity, especially to me. I love hearing back people meta me, especially when they go, he wouldn't do that, or even better, this is the sort of thing he would do, and I go, I don't remember ever doing it, but that does sound like the sort of thing I do.
So speaking of using executions on the right targets, I think that executing good empath neighbors is, I'm going to say this in a kind of careful way, it's almost never as good a use of your resources as executing almost anybody else. I say that because I think it can move you closer to winning the game. I think it is something, executing empath neighbors that are good, like let's say the empath got a 0, if you execute their good neighbors, it will get you more information, it will bring you closer to winning the game. But I don't think it does as much for your win as executing other players who are not confirmed good players by the empath.
I think that there's kind of two situations here.
Confirmed loosely.
I think there's two situations here. Either that empath is good and they're confirmed good players, in which case, cool, that's useful, good to know. And I don't want to execute them because they're good. Or that's someone bluffing empath who is confirmed to be good players, and I'm fine with that. Or that's an evil player trying to confirm other evil players. Now, the thing about evil players trying to confirm other evil players is the information mounts, right? Once you get one, you get several in that situation. So people don't do it that often. But also, to me, this is not agreeing or disagreeing with his point. It's just a thing about executing empath neighbours. I think the best reason to execute an empath neighbour is to see how their information changes. Not because I want to go, you went from a 0 to a 1, your new neighbour is evil. It's because I want to go, all right, okay, in the world where that player is evil, the empath is evil, why would they go from a 0 to a 1? What world are they building here? And conversely, if they've not had neighbours change and they try and change their numbers, that tells you a lot as well. Like the great thing about empaths is that it's the easiest information in the world to bluff, because you just say a number between 0 and 2. And people keep telling me that between 0 and 2 is a terminology that means 1. That's not how numbers work. Between is inclusive. And also 0 is a number while we're on the subject.
Thank you all for coming. We're gonna have to call it right there.
I don't know, the storyteller just woke me up and showed me a song.
I did try to show someone pie once when they knew they were drunk, but that's good.
Did you just hold it up like one digit at a time?
That would have been good. No, I was trying to do the symbol with my. But also, that would have been in our like what pastry is each number. Like if we're rounding pi, that would be 3, right? So that's not.
I mean, yeah, if you're an engineer.
Yeah, if you're an engineer, not physicist. Don't round pi to 3 if you're a physicist. That's not going to help. Anyway, that was a tangent. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, empath. Bluffing is empath. As soon as an empath neighbour dies, it's best if it's in a situation where they don't know it's going to happen. If you give an evil bluffing empath, we executed your neighbour, they have all the time they want to decide what they're going to claim next. If they wake up in the morning and the demon has killed one of their neighbours, they've got to just decide what they're claiming.
Yeah.
And that's actually really powerful social information, and you can see them decide. That's quite fun as well, because there's 2 reasons for an empath to look surprised when they wake up. Both of them are because one of their neighbours has died. And one of them is, damn, I thought that person was evil, why have they died at night? And the other one is, oh damn, I need some more information. And both of those are really quite useful to you because you can get a read on which one it's more likely to be by talking to that empath. So I'd much rather empath neighbours died at night. And if you just try and choose to arbitrarily trust those empath neighbours with an empath of 0, a lot of the time they will. Not necessarily because they are actually good, but also demons like to kill those just because it reinforces bluffs as well. Like if the demon is sat there with an empath of 0, they will often kill the neighbour to be like, well, now I can give more information, but also it makes me look trustworthy because they chose to kill my neighbour, right? I'm confirming people, and so it gives you more and more as you go. Like, everything has a social read.
I think it's also, when I was originally writing this, I was actually kind of thinking about this as like you are the empath, and you get a 0. So I want to touch on that as well. That was the situation where I was thinking it's especially like you shouldn't be going after your neighbors to get more info. Is kind of what I was thinking. I like where you took it. From the rest of the town's perspective.
Yeah.
I do think that from the town's perspective, there are definitely times when you would want to kill the empath's neighbors when they have a 0.
Yeah. But it's usually because of other information, rather than because of.
It's not entirely because of that. But there's lots of like circumstances that can contribute to it. And as an empath, sometimes you'll be like, okay, I'm fairly sure I'm drunk based on everything that's been told to me, so let's kill my neighbors. But I think just like in the abstract, if you are an empath, you get a 0. I just don't think it's very strategically useful to try to get more information by extending your range, as opposed to just keeping those players alive. Because if they're alive at the end, either they're going to die naturally, of natural causes.
Natural causes, as it comes to Ravenswood Bluff, which is brutal murder. But they're very similar to natural causes. Don't ask questions. Don't ask about the medical service.
In that case, your range is going to be extended already.
Yeah.
Or they're going to be alive at the end. And you win.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it works. It's great. Do you want to move on to another point because we've just wandered all around the empaths on this?
I feel like also, now that I'm reading that last point in this next one, I feel like 2 of the games I've played recently are like things that almost contradict these, but I still believe them. This one is, it's okay to execute the saint early.
Brackets.
Sorry.
If you have a reason to.
Close brackets.
So, this is, I think that it's keeping the saint alive, certainly to the end. You have the most time to gather information about them. However, I think that if you already have information pointing to them being evil, it's often better to pull the trigger early for purposes of killing minions, primarily. If they're the demon, you might just win. But if they are a minion, you would like to remove that possibility as soon as possible. It lets you build more focused worlds. So killing a saint or a claimed saint, if you believe that they are not the saint, I wouldn't recommend executing someone you believe to be the saint. Killing a claimed saint will either, it could lose you the game instantly, but if you have enough reason to believe that they are evil, then that will close off many worlds down the line, because the longer you keep them alive, the longer you're going to have to think, okay, somebody could be poisoned right now by that saint who could be the poisoner. Somebody, you have the possibility of someone star passing to them if they somehow gain trust later. It's just, and also with the voting, it goes back to the voting. So that's very much related to the idea of wanting to kill minions early. Like if you were only trying to kill the demon, then leaving the saint who might be the demon alive forever until the final 3 is fine. But if you're thinking about killing minions early, I think it just makes a lot of sense to close off that world so that you can be more focused in the way you're playing the game in the future.
Yeah, and I totally agree. It's one of the most. It's actively a meme, right? Is the saint is the poisoner, right? That's just a thing, because they do it so often, and there's a reason they do it so often. Is because the only person apart from the demon who wants to survive to the end of the game is the poisoner, and so they want to be claiming saint. And do you know the poisoner's favourite thing is when they survive to all games to the final 3 by claiming saint. Poison people the entire time by claiming saint, and then they get executed in the final 3 because they were claiming saint. Like, call that bluff sometimes. Like, if you've got a reason that you think that person is dodgy, and especially because saints tend to get a lot of sort of free passes from people.
Saint is like the only character where players will be like, I am actively very suspicious of you, I think you're evil. Let's not execute you.
Yeah.
Like, that's the only character where that happens.
And it's not just information, right? People will do this all the time. The saint will vote on something that you're like, why did you vote on that? And then you'll just leave that be. I'm like, kill this bastard. Let's get that. No, I'm not having it. So this kind of segues nicely into one of the other points that I've got, which is, well, actually you started this, and it's something that I greatly agree with, and I was disappointed that you beat me to it, to be honest, which is ghost votes can and often should be used earlier than people currently use them. They're not only for the final day. Do you know the thing about the final day? The evil team still has fewer votes than you, even if you've used 1 or 2 already. They don't have a lot less than you, and so you do need to be more aligned than you would be otherwise. But if that ghost vote breaks a tie and gets rid of that poisoner claiming saint, that's a win, right? If you spent 1 ghost vote and killed an evil player, you've gained from that use of a ghost vote. It's not, ideally you wouldn't have to use it, but the situation where this comes up is one of something we all know. The first couple of days in TV, you will more often than not have executed 2 good players. And do you know what some of those 2 good players can do, especially if they're investigators that have got information that, if they throw that ghost vote to get someone they strongly and sincerely believe is evil out of here, they've helped, even though they don't have a ghost vote in the final 3.
I think it's something where you can calibrate whether or not you should be using ghost votes based on how many evil players you think you've killed. Or, alternatively, what the worst case scenario is. Because there's a lot of times when it's like, we might have killed an evil player, but there's also a chance there's 3 of them alive right now.
Yeah.
If you're feeling like you're in that situation, you're either in the good world where good is winning pretty well and you won't need your ghost vote later, or you're in the bad world where you really need to use your ghost vote right now.
Yeah, and if you've got great conviction about something, and people that watch various streams will see Patters do this frequently. Patters loves to throw a ghost vote because what he's basically saying is, I believe in this strongly enough that I want to dissuade you from even thinking about doing anything else. I spent a resource for this. And that's a social play. It looks like a mechanical play, but that's a social play. He's getting in your head and going, this was important enough to me that I want this person dead, to the point that I no longer have any mechanical interaction with the rest of the game. The only thing I get for the rest of the game is my voice, because I've spent my only vote to get this butt guy dead.
I will
and that
also
means
say that
so much.
It's not, like, it is social, but a part of the reason it's so strong socially is that evil players have far fewer ghost votes than good players. So it's a much bigger deal for an evil player to spend that. So it's like, if they're committing that hard, most of the time evil players aren't willing to commit that hard to what story they're trying to sell, especially when it's a story that might get disproven immediately after the vote succeeds.
And I'm going to address this from the other perspective. We've talked a lot from the good perspective. As evil, that is true, you have fewer ghost votes. But also, that's also a really powerful way of keeping today's execution where you want it to be. If your demon is the second biggest candidate for execution, and you look at the hands going up on the other candidate for execution and they're not enough, and you throw your ghost vote on there, they're not executing your demon. I mean, they might if you were linked to them, but otherwise you're probably going to get away with that other player getting executed and the demon at least getting a chance to start pass, a chance to do something else, a chance to do what evil do, and throwing a ghost vote out there is, again, it works so strongly because I'm going to say it's so meaningful to people. It's so meaningful to people that don't get drunk and forget that they died. But outside of that situation, it means a lot to the rest of town because they're like, whoa! And it means a lot because someone has to bend over and take that token off the town square and literally have a physical thing you had to do to go, this is how important it was to me.
I think this ties into, as well, when you're doing this as evil, you don't want to do it when you have to.
Oh yeah.
You want to. I think it's very strong for evil to spend their ghost votes in situations where they are not being forced to save their demon, which is the most common time you'll see it. I think that proactively doing it will get you the results you want in a way that doesn't like link you to any particular players. When it's re-examined later, there's not any extra information to glean from it.
Yeah, I mean, if I go back to that Pat's example, he will sit there with his hand up going, I believe this and I'm using my vote. I'm using my vote, don't question it, I'm using this ghost vote, and then he'll hold his hand there and then sometimes he'll drop it because he's a bastard. But spent too much time playing with me. But the vast majority of the time he's telling you it's going to happen because he's going, I believe in this. And it's not like, I don't want that. It's, I believe in this. He says, trying not to punch things off the table. Jesse would kill me.
Tyler would kill you.
Tyler would also kill me. There would be a lot of collateral damage.
All right, I've got another hot take.
Oh, I like this one. Is this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
I think Undertaker is one of the weakest characters in Trouble Brewing.
I said I like it. I didn't say I agreed with it.
They don't get any information to start the game, so they can't they need you to execute somebody on the first day, but they can't contribute mechanical information to helping guide that vote. When they do get information, it's on dead players, which is occasionally useful, but often it just tells you something you already knew. And that also ties into it has a fairly poor interaction with the Virgin, for instance, which is a character that makes you want to turn an execution into information, but in doing so you lose. I guess you could see this as being the Virgin being bad here as well, but it's like this particular combination of characters I think is a fairly weak combination. In a game with a Virgin and an Undertaker, I would expect the good team to have a slightly harder time. Just because they're both characters that have executions as a resource, but they can't gain from the same executions very much.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with some of this. I think it's one of the weaker characters on the script from a good perspective if you only evaluate it in a mechanical perspective. I think it's becomes much more powerful when you consider it in the context of it's one of the characters that the evil team don't necessarily know as well what's going on with it. So actually it can become quite powerful only in the context of it's information that the good team's getting that the evil team isn't. The evil team knows what an empath's going to get. They know at least broadly what other information might be. They might not know exactly who's being confirmed by the washwoman, but they know it's within the categories it's going to be in. The evil team, if it's not an evil player getting executed, then I don't know what you've just found out as an Undertaker. This is why I am arguing against you gently. They don't know what you're finding out, and therefore they don't know how to fight against it. If you've got an Undertaker who's just confirmed a fortune teller who earlier picked the demon, the evil team have to do something about that, but they don't know that they need to do something about that because they don't know what the information was. There's combinations of things here which can have more impact, and I think the doubt in the evil team puts more in than you're giving it credit for. But mechanically, I 100% understand that if you went, how useful is this in isolation? The Undertaker's not that great.
Well, I think that a lot of that value comes from players playing in a way that creates value for the Undertaker. So the less you know about what people's true characters are, the more powerful the Undertaker's information will be, because the evil team's not going to know what they're learning either. They can use that to confirm players, to confirm themselves. It can be very powerful when you hit that full upside.
But only if you've actually set up that upside.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, every strategy that everyone else wants to do isn't necessarily considering that, because you don't know if there's an Undertaker. Why would you change what's going to make most sense for your character and the characters you've heard of for an Undertaker that no one's even whispered might be in play? Harking back to the earlier point, letting people know that there might be an Undertaker in play on day one, even if you're not playing it, gives them some context to that. If I hear it, genuinely, I really appreciate it on day one if someone goes, I've heard of an Undertaker. Actually really helps, just because it gives you a little bit of a guide as to is it worth us even executing people for information from an Undertaker.
Yeah, so I think Undertaker has a very high ceiling of how good it can be. And I think it's a character that is very hard to play around when the Undertaker is getting really strong info. In practice, I have not seen it very often. That might be because I've been playing with a lot of new players recently. I've been getting sort of the local scene in San Diego going to a larger extent. And so I've been playing tons of games with newer players. So that could be why. Maybe with very experienced players, the Undertaker ends up being a lot stronger. But just recently, I've noticed that the Undertaker loses a lot more often than other characters.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think it's because you have to work hard to get the value out of it.
Makes sense. I'm going to, purely because I'm going to do something I never do, which is try and keep us on script and say a phrase that I absolutely hate, which is agree to disagree. Let's move on. Don't agree to disagree. Talk about it. Find common ground. Anyway, do you want to pick another one?
Yeah, I think we just got like 2 things, so we should be able to 3. Oh,
Yeah, there's another one. Yeah, I think so. Then there's another section.
All right, let's not waste time talking about what we don't have time to talk about. I think that something like a confirmed washerwoman or librarian is generally better to keep alive than like an ongoing source of information. This is related as well to like confirmed outsiders being stronger. So I think that these roles that have something, they're tying themselves to another character or another player. So that is going to be useful whether they're good or not.
Yeah.
And so I think keeping them alive until the point that you decide that, oh, it's time to execute them.
Yeah.
But I think that if you're having to choose between like the washerwoman who's confirming someone or executing the empath who we don't know anything about but is claiming to have ongoing info, I'd often rather execute the empath. This isn't one where it's like, I think always do this, but it's like, I just think people should consider it a lot more than they do.
Yeah, pending other information, this could be more useful. Is basically the point there.
Yeah, a lot of my opinions recently have just been like, keep good players alive as long as you can. The players you can trust the most are the ones that should not be dying.
Yeah. Come on, Junior. Do you want to do that sort of one? I want to do that one. I like this one. Firstly, I have put the words round robin in heavy quotes because I hate that. That's not a round robin. A round robin is a tournament format. Anyway, telling everyone, going around and everyone claiming their characters any time before the final day is not helping. I know we've talked about getting information out there so that everyone can make decisions going into the final day and have some time to think about it, but actually sitting there having everyone go, you claim, now you claim, now you claim, most often isn't helping, because there's like a quarter of this script who get screwed by that. The monk, the raven keeper, the soldier, any outsiders that have successfully hidden until now are sitting there going, well, I would have quite liked to not tell you that.
Yep.
Do you know the best time, the easiest time for a raven keeper soldier to die or a monk to protect someone? The day after you've executed at 5.
Yeah.
So if you're doing a round robin or a roll call or a character reveal at 5, you're basically saying to those people, yeah, you know that ability that you might get to do like now, yeah, don't.
It's when the pool of candidates to be killed at night is the smallest.
Yeah.
So.
And also, it's so hard to say no to as well. Like, if you're the one who is sitting there going, well, I'm the Raven Keeper, and I don't want to do this, you can't do that, because then it's like, oh, well, never mind. We might as well have just done it, and we could have not looked sus.
Yeah. Early on in the game, it's easy as one of those characters to just refuse to claim, because you could be like a ongoing info or something.
Yeah.
But that late in the game, the ongoing info ones are generally going to be happy to claim, but like Raven Keeper still won't be.
So yeah, this is just an open plea to everyone to never call for that on Final 5 if you can avoid it.
Alright, we have one last thing. Capelli's like making a weird signal to me. I think he was stretching or something. And I put this section here, I didn't have anything for it, but you added something. Entirely new ideas / thought technology. Ed, you have 1 minute, then we gotta stop.
Okay, I didn't really have something that's entirely new. It's just something that I have a strong opinion about, and people don't listen to it enough. I don't know why, because all my opinions are great. I don't know what you're talking about. People have better social reads than they think they do, but not when they're thinking about them. People have there's a lot of people who say, oh, my social reads are terrible, or my social reads are great, or, you know, that person's social reads are top notch. People tell me that all the time, that my social reads are great. But I'm not necessarily talking about good social reads as a mental problem. It's not. There's no algebra problem that goes, that person twitched like this, and that means they're evil. That's not how that works. The way that social reads work is your subconscious interacting with their microtics to tell you information. And so the most powerful way to channel your social reads is to not decide whether you're voting until you have to vote. Because panic is the moment that your system goes, this is the call. And everyone's done this, right? The whole toss a coin to decide what the correct information is. That is so powerful in Blood and the Clocktower. People sit there going, I don't have good social reads, so I ignore them. No, what you need to do is, I don't have good conscious social reads. Let's see what my subconscious has got. I guarantee you will get success. Everyone I tell this to who's like, look at me, I'm literally being laughed at in the audience. Everyone that I convince to try it, you will discover that you have better social reads than you think. You just don't know that because you're too busy thinking to listen to your social cues. There we go. That was more than a minute, and I don't care.
That is all the time we have.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you all for coming to watch us here, and Ed, thanks for being on.
Any opportunity to talk bollocks with a good friend.
Kelly,
What?
and that's all the time we have. Thank you, everyone.